Hi guys, welcome to the Church Split. My name is Will, and we got not Brian with us today. So first off, if you guys haven't already, I just want to say, do not like and subscribe to the Church Split. Don't do it. Why? Because you should totally go subscribe to our haters. People like Kanan Radio, they definitely need the help. So you should go there and go show them some love or not, whatever. And also, you should just thumbs down this video because, we're terrible. Or, you like us, but you want to thumb us down. Anyway, why? Because you want to give the haters validation. Also, if you haven't already, leave us a 1-star review on Apple Podcasts and let us know. Well, not this episode, though. You won't want to hurt my sister's ego. She's already like, oh my goodness. So that was a spoiler right there. I just dropped what it was. So, guys, I have a special guest with me in studio all the way from the great Commonwealth state of Virginia. I have my sister, Melinda Wright. Now, of course, we don't share a last name because she married.
Yes.
So.
In fact, I need to steal a sign.
Mrs.
Put
Always
Mrs.
Right.
Always Right.
But that one doesn't have a W. Okay, you can keep it.
It's an adaptation I can make with a Sharpie.
You keep Mrs. Always Right. Mr. Always Right. That's weird. We don't know. It was 2021. We're allowed to be gender fluid. So, anyway, guys. Are we
That's
actually
just
going?
creepy.
We're going to actually swap this around? Okay. We're making this really extra. So, guys, anyway, I apologize for the not... This is a sibling show, so you guys are going to be along for a great ride. Probably because you'll see some more of our standard talks that we have when we talk for like 2 hours on the phone. It's kind of a thing. So, anyway, for those of you who do not know, my sister actually lives like about 12 hours away. We have been best friends most of our life. When we were really little kids, not so much, but there was like a 4-year difference. That was unfair to expect us to actually get along.
Facts.
So, she's actually my birthday present. So,
Ta-da!
I turned 30 today. I am 30 years old today.
Happy
so
birthday.
I already bought my plot of land for my grave, and I'm planning funeral arrangements now. But my wife is amazing, and she sneaked them up here, and she goes, "Honey, there's somebody in the house." And I was upstairs getting the baby, and I'm like, "What do you mean someone in the house?" And I get to the top of the stairs, look down the stairs, I see a blonde boy walk by. I'm like, "Whose kid is in my house? Who's in my house?" So I run downstairs, and I'm looking at this boy walking in my living room, but I just see the back of his head. I'm like, what is going on? I turn around, and there's Melinda and Drew. And it was really cool.
Bam.
Yeah, and so
Happy
we
birthday.
hugged, and it was really cool, and it was awesome. It's been a lot of fun this
And
week.
you shed tears.
I did not shed tears. I smiled, and I gave you a big hug.
And your eyes were red.
Okay, I worked like a 12-hour shift, okay? I was exhausted. That actually wasn't a 12-hour shift that day, but I was tired, okay? That had nothing to do with it. I don't love you that much. So, anyway, we're going to get rolling here. So, I wanted you guys to kind of get a chance to get to know Melinda, because actually it's funny, some of you people who are involved in like the RFP groups and whatnot, Melinda has gotten this like weird fan club, and like I love when Melinda Wright jumps in, and when people connect with siblings, like, oh, it makes so much sense, because they both like to watch the world burn. So we're just highly argumentative, and there's reasons for that. So Melinda, enough about me, more about you. Why don't you tell the audience a little bit about Melinda?
Okay. Well, we are best friends now, but back in the day we were not. When we were younger, he was the favorite. Can you believe that? So, yeah, he was the favorite, and I was very, very, very jealous of him. And I think he's already mentioned to you all that our home was fairly dysfunctional. So
That's a good way to put it.
yeah. Everything was my fault, and it was a lot for a young child. That's mostly what I remember. But as things in our home grew more dysfunctional, I would open up my bedroom door to see objects flying through the house because my parents were fighting again, and they're throwing things at each other. And I heard my brother, Will, crying in the next room. And again, he is 3.5 years younger than me. So even though I was jealous of him, backtrack a little bit, a Sunday school teacher had gone over the story of Joseph with me. And I realized through that story that it wasn't Will's fault. I couldn't be mad at him.
Are you comparing me to the brothers that sold Joseph into slavery right now?
Maybe.
Oh, God works in mysterious ways. Keep going.
you did try to flush my books down the toilet.
Look,
so.
I was 3. Okay, you can't hold a 3-year-old's actions against them.
You can when you're 7.
That's true. Keep going on, telling people about the sob story. Let's make everyone cry.
So I started trying to protect him because he was really upset. I closed the door and I put my arms around him. And that's basically what started the warrior bond between us.
I'd say that's accurate. And when you said the other day, you're like, well, I'd like to make sure we talk about our warrior bond. I'm like, warrior bond? I never thought about it that way, but it very much is that way.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of like, people don't talk about this, because, I mean, soldiers, and we have some actually very well experienced veterans who listen to the show.
Yeah.
And veterans will tell you all the time that, when you go through that much with somebody, they're your brothers no matter what. You're close to them. And that same thing happened with us, where we were going through so much trauma and so many things were happening that that bond just kind of brought us together. And no matter what, and for people who do not know, we were both raised in a highly abusive home. Mom was probably more harsh on you. I think Dad was more harsh on me. It's just kind of the way it worked. We balanced each other out, but then you were Dad's favorite, I was Mom's favorite. So we definitely manipulated that system.
Oh, definitely. We want something from Dad? I asked. We want something from Mom? Will asked.
It worked out perfectly. But so as far as things like you, so we lived in a dysfunctional home. I've mentioned it a little bit. I've mentioned some of the experiences on here, just so people are aware. So of course, I watched my mom. We both were there when Mom was arrested. You were there when Mom was arrested.
Oh,
right?
definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just remember helping hold her down. That's all I remember. So, and I couldn't remember if you were there or not. So, because you also went to college at one point.
Yeah, not long after that.
Right. So, we went through that. Me and Dad went to fisticuffs a couple of times. There's a lot of things. Vacuums were thrown and used as clubs.
Yeah.
But some wild stuff. So what were some of the things that kind of like were like, bam, these stick out of my mind of things I went through. You went through.
That I went through.
Because we were homeschooled, so we never even got to escape any of it. Well, kind of. That was a big thing for you, right? The switch?
The switch.
From public school to homeschool?
Yeah. So I went to public school through 5th grade, and then my dad's job switched, and we ended up moving an hour and a half away. And it was fairly traumatic because all my friends and my life was at school. All of my memories that I have as a child were at school.
Plus everything at home, that was your comfort zone.
Right.
That
was my safe
zen.
zone.
Yep.
I had actually quite a group of friends that I led, and then we moved and I wasn't allowed to have contact with those friends anymore. We started going to a nice church, but there weren't any kids really my age to play with that I got along with super well, just personality differences. So I felt
The Hess kids
isolated.
have always been weird.
Yeah, so I was very isolated and alone for
Yeah.
a long time. And I think that's a lot of why I'm introverted.
Yeah, and so that's another thing for people who do not understand. You and I think very similarly. We're both very equally blunt in our natural capacity, but I'm very extroverted. I love talking to people. I go all day. I mean, I go literally till midnight interacting with people.
Yeah.
And you're like the person who's like, I like people from a distance.
I like to observe people.
I'm one of like 3 people you'll have long conversations with. So all my introvert friends, I'm sure you can relate to that, especially being on a podcast is awkward probably for an introvert. But
Yeah.
the other thing is,
Easier with you, though.
So yeah, well, I mean, because again, warrior bond. So you went through some abusive things. So what were some of the things that you experienced? Because once you were homeschooled, that's when things really changed. Once we got homeschooled, because we didn't have an escape. It was just we lived and breathed the home, and Dad was oftentimes at work, not even knowing what was happening at home.
Yeah, there was just so many memories to try and sift through. I think just the pressures of trying to compensate for a small public school education and then being forced to do full-on Bob Jones without any kind of segue into it, and I was failing. I went from an A/B honor student to D's and E's. And Mom, who didn't really have much of a high school education and really struggled to teach us. She couldn't, when I asked her a question, all she'd do is reread the problem to me. Yeah. And I'm like, if I understood that, I wouldn't have approached you. So she'd grow frustrated, and we were constantly at each other's throats. So she'd throw my books. She would tear. I would work on math for 48 hours basically, and she'd tear it to pieces.
Didn't you once almost catch a Lego set with your face? One of mine.
I don't remember.
Oh, crashed against the wall. I was very upset. Anyway, so
There were a lot of things thrown like constantly.
yeah, luckily no one had very good aim.
Yeah.
A trait that still runs in the family. Oh, no. So this is actually what, for people who don't know my background as far as this was concerned, when we moved, when Dad got the new job, that is when we actually switched into IFB.
Yeah.
So that's when we joined the Independent Fundamental Baptist movement, because before we were going to a Bible church. That was a pretty conservative one, but then we took the next step, and that's when Dad started buying in more hook, line, and sinker. I know he regrets a lot of that now because I ended up biting him in the butt later.
I do think he was taught a lot of it at the previous church, though.
I do believe so as well.
Yeah.
So the IFB set, and it was an IFB light church, but there's some people that are more extreme than others in it. So now, but here's the thing. Where you and I went different directions eventually. You and I always kept our warrior bond. You and I were super close. And by the way, Melinda and I are a great example of how you can have such a close relationship but be on totally different islands.
Absolutely.
Like, the older I got, like in high school and stuff, the more I started seeing through the crap, for lack of a better term. I started seeing the IFB hypocrisy left and right. You know, one of the big ones that stuck out in my mind, there's a girl that started coming to our church. She was from a divorce home. She was there every other week. And I wanted to sing Come Thou Fount, and I was going to play guitar. We were going to sing it all together, and this girl was going to join us. And I remember she was super excited, so she went out and bought a dress just for the occasion because, you know, IFB, you have to sing in front in a dress.
Yes.
So she gets a dress just for the occasion, but it was slightly above the kneecap. Like, you couldn't even see her thigh. It was just like slightly above the kneecap.
I remember her wearing it.
Yep.
It was very
classy.
Very classy.
Very classy. Yeah. And right before we sang, one of the pastor's wives grabbed her and told her she couldn't wear it before they sang. And it was moments like that. I'm like, really? This girl from a divorce and broken. Well, she stopped going to church. And Lord only knows where she's at now.
Right.
And so it was things like that that kept happening in the youth group because we ended up with an pretty extreme IFB youth pastor and stuff.
That wasn't the case when I was in the youth group.
Right.
Like, that came in as I was a senior in high school. So it was a lot slower to segue into it.
Yeah, it was like the one side of the church kind of went on a slow steep, and I kind of was at the bottom of it.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably why it took you longer to get
difference.
out. But then what ended up happening is I started rebelling and pushing back against it. Even it's weird because I went to Bible college too, and I kept pushing against it. It's like I started pushing against it in high school and kept pushing against it as we kept going. And then you bought in hook, line, and sinker. Like you jumped in.
Yeah.
And you, even though you had an inquisitive mind, you'd be like, not sure about that, but you just do it because it was safe.
Yeah.
So why was that? Why do you think that you bought in and I did not?
Well, our home was very sad and depressing and not safe. I didn't get, how to say these things. I didn't get a lot. I didn't feel like I was supported at home, and I believe I blamed it all on the worldliness in the home. So the video games, the movies, the going out to eat on Sundays, the getting gas on Sundays. I mean, I blamed it all on the irreverence of Scripture and God, which a lot of it was. But I took it to the extreme with the IFB because I saw families that were full of children that seemed happy and they seemed to support one another and get along well. And to me, that's what I wanted. I wanted a godly family who loved the Lord and was supportive of each other and safe.
And you attributed that success to the performance-based Christianity thing or the legalistic side of things.
Because that's how they say things. You know, you wear this to be safe. We show that people this to be safe.
Yeah, that's why we wear the skirts and pants because the skirts because it allows us to show the world that we're Christians, and it's a safer way to go. Yeah, maybe not. Bible might not say anything about that, but it's a safer way to go.
Exactly.
So for you, and this is where it gets funny between you and me. I went, this is stupid, so I want to separate and then plus they kept trying to shove dumb things down my throat.
Yeah.
so it just pushed me away from it. And then for you, you found security in it.
Yeah.
Where I found chaos at home and then chaos at church.
Right.
So it's just funny the way you and I interpret that different. So I jumped to the world. And the actual world, not what the IFB says is the world.
Yeah.
And, you went, and you just kind of pulled in a way. And it was almost your way of feeling almost like a moral superiority, right?
Yeah.
I'm not like you people. I'm better than you.
I'm not going to become like my family was. I was going to build something better.
Right. So there's a bit of that IFB pride that seeped in.
Yeah.
Yep. And I had the IFB pride as well, where I had to be right all the time. So
Had to
some
be.
things never change. So I'm just a lot better at being right now. So
Most of the time.
Most of the time. Yeah, well, I'm only right when I'm speaking. So, okay. So then you went. So I remember at a young age you fell in love with deaf missions. Like you wanted to be in deaf ministry, and that's a fun thing that the IFB does have a decent focus on.
Yeah.
Is deaf missions, and so you started learning sign language. You started teaching it to me. I thought it was cool because it was my little secret language with my sister, especially when mom and dad were being crazy.
Yeah. Can stay quiet and still hold a conversation.
Exactly.
Any way you can talk, you will.
Mm-hmm. And actually, later on, you influenced me to go into deaf ministry as well, which is why I'm fluent in it now. So I'm a little rusty right now, but Timothy, your son, my nephew, is hard of hearing. And so now we're having to sign to him. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I got to dust off the old hands. It's been fun.
Yeah, I learned all kinds of signs I didn't know, like Batman and Flash and Hulk.
Good stuff.
The important ones.
Yeah, which one's Hulk?
Green.
Oh, green and rare.
And monster, yeah.
Cool.
Or he emphasized the big muscles.
Oh yeah, well.
And boys love that.
Yeah, of course. That's awesome. So, So you went to deaf missions, and then you went to Crown College, which is, of course, one of the few IFP places with a huge deaf outreach, which is one of the many great things about Crown.
Yeah.
And that's where you met Drew.
Yeah.
And you guys, and how was that? So now you left the abusive home.
Yeah.
You abandoned me.
Kind of. I abandoned you. I did pass the baton, didn't I?
Actually, what people don't realize is actually the person who stands before you today, this guy right here, that was a definitive moment, is when you left the home, because you were the protector, you were the glue that kept it all together. Yeah. And you left, and it put it on me. And I was somewhat.
It was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do.
Yeah, well, it was not fun to be left, but I remember distinctly going, "This family is my responsibility now."
Yeah.
Because I knew
at 14.
Yeah, at 14 years old, because I knew that the adults couldn't be adults.
Yeah.
So that was a big thing for me. And so the fighter that you see before you today, this guy here who's like, "No, I'll take the fight to the man. I don't care what you say," was born in that moment. I had to learn how to fight there, and that's why no matter what people say, no matter what people do, nothing really intimidates me anymore.
Right.
And it's just because after the hell we've been through.
Yeah.
What you got there, pumpkin? Let's go.
When you've had to stand between parent and brother almost every day, sometimes at 2 o'clock in the morning, you just didn't know when it was going to hit.
Yeah, 5 a.m., suddenly you hear screaming downstairs, and you have to rush to your brother's aid while he's getting dragged out and slapped to pieces.
Yeah.
All because he didn't do his laundry the day before or something.
Sometimes I'm not sure there was a reason.
No, well, that would be the excuse.
Yeah.
So.
But to take things back with the deaf missions, so a lot of the reason I also went IFB is a lot of the people in our church had actually supported me. They took me to sign language classes. They picked me up so I could go to ministries when my parents wouldn't take me.
To be fair,
they were there for me. They were my family that I didn't have. They actually genuinely took care of me. And things changed between me and Will's time, and I think just the different ministries we were involved in.
Mm-hmm. Well, and to be fair, there were some really good people there. Like, to this day, there's certain people, it's like, if I ever go back, I get really excited about seeing certain people.
Absolutely.
Because there's some great people. And that's the thing, is like, I don't hate the IFB. The IFB just is very misplaced in a lot of ways, and that are harmful more than helpful. Mm-hmm. But if they fix the harmful parts, they'd actually be an extremely powerful force.
Oh, yeah. And that was, I think, what was unique about our church, is we had a mix. We had jean wearers, and we had the skirt wearers, and we had the culotte wearers, and we had don't know.
Yeah, it was a very strange mix, and now some of them look down at others.
I thought we
for
could
it,
all
but-
just get along because that's what I always saw.
Yeah, and then once you left, and we got the other administration and things shifted.
Yeah.
And that old administration, things have taken a big turn for the worse on that older one.
Yeah.
Quite incredible is another topic for another time. But so you went to Deaf Missions, you went to Crown. Now you left the abusive home that we went through, and you went to Crown. So
Yeah.
what was that like? So was that like a cathartic experience, like you showing up and finally going, oh my word, I'm actually able to live in peace? How was that whole thing, and then meeting Drew and all that?
Okay. So I was excited about the rules because I did feel safer. I didn't like some of them. I never understood skirts. I tried to. I wrote testimonies about how great skirts were, and I still couldn't convince myself that I liked
I'm trying to brainwash myself. Dang it, it's not working.
but I tried.
It's
So
because you're always a kind of a tomboy, so that doesn't help.
yeah, well, yeah. Survived the hard stuff, not by being a girly, frilly person.
And a delicate flower.
Yeah. So it was Crown. I felt safer. I was so excited. I thought I was going to be with other Christians who were about the same level as I was, ready to face persecution and ready to give up whatever it took to go give the gospel, and kind people, loving people like I'd experienced in my church.
Mm-hmm.
I ended up with roommates that I didn't get along with, that could only talk about what they bought and from where they bought it. And, again, tomboy. I didn't do
When
all
you're like
that.
super practical, then you moved in with like the basic Valley girls.
Yes.
And you're like, what is this?
They did my makeup once. There were all kinds of colors I couldn't even name. I don't know.
I remember you complaining about that. Like, oh my goodness, they're coming in. They're always talking about where they're buying stuff. I'm like, yeah, those are called women.
Drew saw me that day. We weren't dating yet, but he and his buddy go, what happened to you? So meeting Drew, we met through the deaf ministry. Drew is just happy-go-lucky, wants to try everything, wants to explore everything, and he knew sign because the deaf man had attended his church since he was 9. So even though he was there for pastoral ministries, he jumped into the deaf ministry, and that's how we got to know each other.
Yeah. So then you guys eventually decided, because Crown really, and the IFB does this. It's another one of those like weird brainwashing tactics where they'll push something so much, but they bathe it in spiritual language.
Yeah.
So missions conference would come, and they push and they hyper spiritualize this whole event of missions conference there. Have the Parade of Nations, which is they had different people from different countries all wearing things from the native country that represented that country. And talk about how many people were unsaved there. Like they give little fun facts about Christianity in those countries, and they're usually people who are from those countries giving those speeches, which is kind of fun. So hyper spiritualized, and Drew will tell people that he that's where he got pushed into. He's like, oh, I'm going to be a deaf missionary to England.
Yeah, that was interesting because that was our last semester senior year. Up till that point, he was going to be a big name preacher. And I knew that wasn't the direction he was going because of his gifting, but you gotta wait for the guy to figure it out himself sometimes. Mm-hmm. And Deaf Missions was definitely for him. Right.
So you guys do that. So then this is where things I think started falling apart for you. So IFB always brought you security. Mm-hmm. That was what was attractive about it. From a life of chaos, they brought order.
And affection and compassion and love from some of them. And, then I started at Crown, started seeing the other side.
Right.
Especially starting in that room.
So the thing is what
it wasn't the makeup.
Dr. Peterson talks about this, and I think it's really interesting. Too much chaos is always bad, right?
Yeah.
If there's chaos, obviously everyone knows what chaos looks like. Mm-hmm. It's what happens when you give, a room full of 26-year-olds Red Bull and then let them go have, whatever they do whatever they want. That's pure chaos. Chaos is uncontrollable. It's too much. But then there's also something that's too much order as well, because too much order leads to something like communism.
Right.
Right. And which is kind of what the IFB is kind of like. They're very authoritarian, and they're very, and they will punish you. Like, right?
You
Like,
can't question.
yeah, you question something or you go against the grain, you're gonna butt heads. So what's funny is, so you went from the pure crazy chaos into that order of that almost communism state, and then things kind of fell apart for you because marriage wasn't necessarily easy for you two because of a lot of IFB training.
Oh, yeah.
So you guys went to this deaf ministry thing. You started going around on deputation, trying to gain support.
With 3 kids.
Yeah. And so why don't you tell me about that experience a little bit? I think this is something that a lot of the world kind of doesn't understand what missionaries go through. And so it'd be kind of interesting to hear your point on this because remember, actually, I'll say that in a minute. You keep going.
Okay, I'll try to give a summary. So we tried doing deputation part-time while Drew was working, but his job fell through. They just didn't have enough production, so they let him go. Which left us with a baby on the way and 2 little ones, and I don't know, a couple $100 maybe a month. And we were just told, go out on faith, go out on faith. So we went out on faith with $200 a month. Made phone calls. Well, we did get a couple of supporting churches pretty quickly that helped a lot. But then we just traveled, and Drew would spend 12 hours a day on the phone trying to call. And I'm trying to keep order with the kids and try to pack. I would spend 3 days packing. We'd go out on our trips. We'd come back. It'd take me a week to get everything back in order, and then we'd be back out.
This is kind of where churches would be like, oh man, we're going to take good care of you. They'd put you and an entire family of 5 in one little room with one mattress.
Yes,
Be like,
often.
oh yeah, this is great. Yeah, we're going to take care of you.
Kids can sleep on the cement floors.
You'll stay there all week, and then they'll hand you $25 and say thanks.
Yeah, that happened more than once, unfortunately. We'd spend, I don't know, $500 in expenses, and that's not, that's not living easy. That was living on instant oatmeal, dollar menu, gas prices, getting the kids small snacks when they needed. We did everything we could. We carried peanut butter and jelly and bread everywhere we went. So we didn't spend a lot on purpose. It was just mostly gas and $500 for $25. Maybe there were a couple churches that would give us a couple $100 for a love offering. But if you think of what a normal person makes in a week, and we'd spend a week with you, and you can't live off of $200.
Yeah, you can't live off of $200. And so that's
especially a family.
One of the biggest problems that churches don't really. And I've had this issue in general where churches don't take care of a lot of the people like that. Like the IFB had. So there's 2 different problems with when it comes to money and gospel.
Yeah, I hate money, but
you have the poverty. I mean, you have the I got ahead of myself. You have the Joel Osteens, right? The prosperity gospel.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, God just wants to bless you and give you all the money. But then you have the IFB,
name it and claim it.
Yeah. Then you have the IFB, which is like, oh no, pastors, it's okay if they're poor, and they preach they teach what's the word? Poverty gospel.
Yeah.
If you're poor, it means you're doing the work of the Lord, and you should just be okay with that.
Yeah, except we had to look like we were dressed to the nines when we didn't have the money. And when I said, I just had a baby, I don't have money to go shopping, it's like, well, you better go shopping anyway with what money? It was.
I know it's really hard.
It was you're not praying. If you don't have enough money to live on, then you're not praying enough. That we got that a lot. I'm like, well, how? Like we wake up at 5 in the morning. We're praying. Drew spent an hour praying before he did 12 hours of phone calls. Completely not spending time with his family or able to disciple them because they're in bed by the time he gets home, basically.
And that goes into that performance space. Well, you're not praying hard enough. You're not having enough faith. God will take care of you. And it turns into you're doing something wrong. So you need to try what you're doing harder, as opposed to maybe what you're doing is just not working.
Right.
So that was a big problem. So this is where things started falling apart, because once you start traveling to different IFB churches, and I remember I am the liberal rebel brother.
You were already out. Yeah.
I was out. I was pastoring a church now, and I just left it, burning behind me, because actually, to rewind a little bit, one of the big things that made things fall apart for us, well, for you, kind of us, was I was working as a youth pastor at an IFB church that you guys were the sending church from. I jumped in and I helped there, and I was a volunteer associate pastor taking care of the youth group and doing a lot of stuff on my own time and dime for free, because I'm looking at, I've always wanted to minister, but I never thought I'd require a paycheck, because it's just, for me, it's even now, it's about ministry. It's about people. So I go there, and then, of course, there's that whistleblower situation where I had to blow the whistle on a sexual abuse situation that was being covered up a little bit.
A little bit?
I'm saying a little bit to be, I don't know.
Understatement of the year.
It was, a sexual abuse situation that was being downplayed and not respected and dealt with properly.
Yeah,
and
the victim
pastor
was silenced, and the
perpetrator was defended.
Yeah.
And so instead, I, of course, pulled the pin on that hand grenade.
Yeah, and we weren't in town. We were on a trip when all this happened.
Yep, you guys were out on deputation, and it all went, and I just left that place with a nice. I walked away, and that was when, for you, things changed, because again, our warrior bond.
Yeah.
Drew.
They just kicked my brother out of church
for doing a moral thing.
And they didn't just kick you out; they slandered you.
Oh yeah, they had
all over the place.
They had a whole second meeting at night trying to bash me, and they said all sorts of weird stuff. Like I was watching rated X movies with the kids. I'm like, what are you?
No.
What?
Yeah.
So there were some really hilarious things that happened then. But the thing is of course that he knew that he had to slander me before the truth could get out.
Right.
Some people did find the truth out and ended up leaving. But what happened here is, so Drew was very bought in, right? Drew at this point is very bought into the IFB.
I think honestly he was under so much pressure he couldn't think or see his way out of it much, because he was so tired, just so dogged down tired.
That makes sense. So Drew, when all this, this person that he's known for a while, this other pastor, and then me go head to head.
And Drew's dad had died when he was a baby, and this new pastor, he gave Drew a long speech about how he didn't do a great job as a dad and how he wanted to do better, and Drew was like his second chance, basically. So he was like Drew's second dad, so Drew's torn between the pastor who was playing dad and then you.
Right. And so Drew just decided to be Mr. Switzerland in this whole thing, which was Drew and I, we're very close.
Oh,
Drew
yeah.
and I became like,
Best buddies.
we were brother-in-laws that were buds. And it strained my relationship with him. I'm like, this is a moral issue, dude. This is not a, I can be Switzerland. And I told him this. I was like, this is not a Switzerland thing. This is black and white, sexual abuse being covered up, and the perpetrator defended and given excuses by both family and pastor. It's not okay. And then Drew just kind of stopped talking to me for a while because he felt awkward.
Well, he was told to stay faithful to the pastor no matter what mistakes the pastor makes, because God blesses the faithful to the pastor.
Yep, and that's nowhere in the Bible.
It wasn't anywhere in the Bible.
But that goes into the MOG status, the man of God status that the IFB teaches. And
that was not something I was taught ever.
So
that made no sense to me.
Right. Well, our church was, you and I grew up in
I was very frustrated. I didn't understand where Drew was coming from because I didn't grow up the way he did.
Exactly. So that's when you started instantly going like, I'm along for the ride on this, but it even put a strain in your marriage a little bit. There was a big moral wedge there.
Yeah.
And then it finally started kind of crashing down. You started traveling to different IFB churches.
Yeah, we knew there was some things wrong with ours, but we didn't want to. We were told if we switched, we'd probably lose support. And our main goal being to give the gospel to the deaf, we would do it. We're like, well, we have good people in our church that we do care about and that do work hard.
Yeah, and you're like, I don't want to betray them.
Don't want to betray them, and we do trust them. A church isn't the pastor. So we thought more churches would be like the one I grew up in during the time I grew up, and I know it's different for you. And we didn't find that. We found more struggling churches that were, I don't know, they were just struggling and hateful, and Sunday school lessons about what's going on in politics, not without opening the Bible.
That was actually a big problem. That was
Lots of preaching
a lot of
from a
Republican
single line
Baptist
in the
churches.
verse. Yeah. Lots of preaching and Sunday school lessons in which you didn't open your Bible. It was, and I remember looking to Drew. We were listening to we were finally getting out. We were listening to David Platt, and he was actually, I think, he was like, "Wait, where's that in the Bible? Oh, we're over here. Oh, we're over here. I haven't done this in years. This is great, guys. I forgot what this is like."
Yeah, it's
To just open your Bible and actually use it, and not just for the sake of formality.
Yeah, and you read it and having it read in context and have it applied to the message instead of picking a catchphrase from a verse and preaching your politics from it.
Yeah.
It's and that's a big thing. So I know that really started shifting. And then what was happening is you and I would have hours long conversations.
Yeah.
And then I'd have hour long conversations with Drew. And I was hearing both sides of where Drew's standing on things, where you're standing on things,
And he was very good at playing the neutral. We didn't really realize he was putting it all together.
yeah, exactly.
But that's okay, because you're bro.
Yeah, Drew's pretty intuitive. So then over time, you guys, you left, but beforehand, you had left the IFB yourself in your mind.
Yeah.
So what were the things that made you leave? Okay, we mentioned the Republican Baptist Church thing, right? You show up and they preach politics and they talk about, how terrible Obama is, and then
They make fun of the president, which, okay, I disagree with a lot of what a lot of politicians do, but God does say to honor our rulers too.
Right. Well, and it's also like the way you go about it, not being so hateful. And
that
things.
really shouldn't even be a thing from the pulpit. Like, that's still a person that Jesus died for.
Yeah, and then it kind of goes into that whole thing of, again, what is the church for, and what's our priority. So there's that. So what else? What were some things that made you go, you know what? This is ridiculous. Obviously, the sexual abuse scandal that that was a huge one, and then I think Preacher Boys. My friend Eric Swarzinski, you kind of helped with that too, where it's like, oh, that's not this. Preacher Boys showed that.
I haven't been with Preacher Boys for very long, though. I haven't followed them for long.
Okay.
They're great, but I just hadn't, because being a parent, I just hadn't been able to listen to podcasts and stuff until I started working. But
it is me just telling you about.
I heard about Scott during college, and I mean, I knew everything, but that was just wrong. Everything I heard about that was just wrong because of the pastor worship and stuff. It was harder to see in other areas because it's easy to just give it excuses. Well, every ministry is fallible. Every ministry has its problems, and that's true. It's not just the IFB, but once we've traveled and we saw not just our church, in which we just said, our pastor, he's trying his best. He loves people. He just doesn't know better. We made excuses, right? We saw it everywhere we went. Opening a Bible, reading a verse, and then these are the thoughts I have about this, is often how it was presented. It wasn't, this is what God showed me even. It was, I'm going to preach about.
Well, my thoughts are on it, and you're going to sit there and listen.
Right, and it was always way off topic, way, way, way off topic. That got me first. I actually noticed the first couple of weeks we were at that church, but anyway. So that one, music, I already compromised because we grew up without drums and guitars and clapping of hands. And I moved into a church that's all about Southern gospel with that red gospel hymnal that did not have Great Is Thy Faithfulness, and I just hated it because I missed that one song.
How did you miss that? Well, their faithfulness wasn't very great.
And it was all about me songs. Anyway.
Well, I think you're
there were good songs in there. I'm not trying to hate on it entirely. There were good songs, and I did sing that of it.
That's another funny thing with the IFB with you.
Right.
Like, you'd go, one church is like, Southern Gospel's the devil. And then you'd go to the next one, like, all Southern Gospel. And it's like those inconsistencies were red flagging.
Yeah. And I just kind of said, well, I won't do CCM because it can be sensual, and I don't want to have any problems with that because that could be a weakness of mine, and left it at that as a personal preference. So if I was with a friend that played it, they could play it. I wasn't going to say anything. But again, I realized IFB was not going to be like that,
Right.
especially when it came to sign language.
Right.
You couldn't play a track and sign a song. That was too close to dancing.
Yeah, I was actually told that at the church we grew up in, I went to play a song for the deaf choir, and I was going to play it on a CD, and I got reprimanded for that. It's like, well, you should just have somebody sing the song next. I'm like, well, the CD I picked is literally a woman singing to piano.
Right.
So you'd rather me just do a pianist and a singer live and try to arrange even more people to show up to practices? Like, bro, work with me here.
It's really complicated.
Yeah, come on.
Yeah, so music didn't bother me. It was the KJV because I love literature and I love speaking big words even if I don't understand them. I look at a dictionary almost daily.
Which is probably why also since then you're so fierce in debates because you're just like, listen, buddy, I got definitions for days. I read dictionaries with coffee.
Well, because that's one of the things that they do is they redefine words just enough to make it fit their narrative. And that was one of the things that made me go, you want to use Webster's 1828, but that they don't, what you're saying doesn't match up with Webster's.
Yeah. Oh, I forgot that was a big thing for you. Sort of realize that the words they were using, you're like the guy in Princess Bride. You keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means.
Yeah. So it was that, and it was but the overall, I probably would have even stayed, but it was the overall lack of love and the just hatefulness and the standards and the whatever. The man-made standards that were flaunted, and they took so much time for my family. I would get up at 5 a.m, feed the baby, iron all the boys' suits and shirts, and have to get my hair ready, feed everybody breakfast, do my makeup so that I was ready and able to walk into the church at 10.
Yeah, but yeah, no, that was the thing. You get up and you'd have to go through all this process just to make your family presentable, so that way the IFB would accept them, instead of understanding the fact that you have a family with 4 children, all under the age of like 8, and a man who's working hours per week. And okay, how about can my kids just please wear a T-shirt?
Right.
Ironing, putting on ties, trying to make them look presentable is ridiculous.
Yeah. It took so much time. And if it's for the Lord, then time is worth it. But it wasn't for the Lord, it was for man. It was so that when I walked into church, none of the church ladies would look at me with disapproval, so that the pastor wouldn't say that I'm dishonoring my husband, and those kinds of things.
Yeah, so these are things all these, and it was weird because the things that made you snap were different from what made me snap. Yours were like the pragmatic, each and everyday things of just trying to please them at their different churches and having to operate a family in that, and how unrealistic some of this stuff was.
It was impossible.
Right, and then there's me, who's like, for me it was just like, that's dumb, that's illogical, that's dumb, and my stuff were like the things that we've already covered on the channel early on were things that I would consider the pillars of crushing the IFB, so to speak, and their standards, and yours were all the weird nuances of trying to do it on a day-to-day basis. So then when it comes to, so then you ended up leaving IFB in your mind. You checked out. You're like, I'm done. This is stupid. But then you had to be married to a man who was still bought in for a while.
Right.
So.
Because again, his mentors, the people that loved him as a dad, well, they said they loved him as a dad, and in many ways they did, but there was a lot of undue pressure put on him and the family. Anyway.
So what was that like? So what did you do? Like how would you, if you had advice, because I know there's some women out there that are going through the same thing that you're going through, or you went through, I should say.
It's long and it's hard because I wasn't ever fully, completely bought. If you asked me if I was KJV only, I'd say I know, but I like the KJV because I think it uses the better English or is related to the Textus Receptus. But if it contains the gospel, I'm for it. Especially as an interpreter, because when we're interpreting, we all interpret the same songs differently. We use different synonyms, we start with different words, we end with different signs. So that experience alone was all I needed to get out of the KJV only. But for Drew, with being married to somebody who's still in it, for him, he's just a relational kind of guy. He made a lot of those decisions because he's relational and because that's what he'd been taught. And he hadn't ever learned or been in a situation where he really had to question a lot of what he was taught.
Right. And he'll even talk about that. So this is not gossip.
Right. Yeah.
So-
I am not talking bad about my husband. He's okay with all this being aired. Because we love each other and respect each other's limits. But, so being married to him during that time, I mean, we still loved each other. He's still a good man. But I would ask questions. I'd be like, look, I'm doing all this and this and this and this. And because I can't keep up, you're having to do it. Or, did you hear the sermon today? Did you notice this? Did you notice how out of context that was?
Yeah, I actually read the whole verse, and it didn't say what it said. What he said it said.
Right. Did you notice that we didn't ever refer back to it? Or did you just notice how much the preaching was to America rather than to the people present?
Right.
And how very little of it, if any of it, mentioned God.
And it's funny because some of those people who are listening, they're going to be like, yeah, I know I've already done this, but that's the thing, it is long. To get somebody to get out of the brainwashing, because brainwashing is in a straight indoctrination.
Yeah.
It takes time.
It
and
does.
It's funny because it almost happens like this flip of a switch. Because I remember what happened to Drew, he felt like the whole ground fell out from underneath him. And same thing happened to my friend Ethan, who's been on the show, my friend Andrew. There's been plenty of people who's like, they just felt their entire ground, it all fell out from underneath them.
Yeah.
When they confronted a lot of it. So that's what Drew kind of went through.
Yeah, for him, I just loved him through it. I asked him questions, and I had no problem even debating him. But there were things, of course, that I didn't have all the answers, and he would sometimes answer me, just kind of try to cut me off and change the subject. He's very skilled at that. But he was thinking. It did put those seeds in his brain to think about. And as it added up and as he observed, he started noticing things. And then finally, instead of just hearing it from his wife, who he always loved and valued me, but I wasn't a mentor or a brother, and it was only one source.
Right.
You need more than one source. Mm-hmm. Finally, you confronted him one night. You finally broke the rest of what he had believed. You were able to answer his questions.
We're up to like, what, 2 a.m.?
Yeah, and we never do that.
Yeah, he was
but
up
that
to
was
about
worth
2.
it.
I remember just seeing his face because he was like, well, this. And then I was like, well, what about this? And that started showing all the logical contradictions and how it's all subjective and how it's all arbitrary and connected to the standards of man. And I just remember seeing, and Drew's never quiet. If you guys know anything about Drew, he's not a quiet dude.
No.
And he was silent. Mm-hmm. And he said that he had a hard time sleeping for the next couple of nights because it's finally all those little seeds that were planted along the way had cracked the foundation enough that all I had to do was like basically walk up there and just punch it once, and it all fell apart.
And I don't think that you need my brother has to necessarily
not a bit
call your husband and give him a talking
Please
to.
don't,
Just
I don't have enough time.
But there will, let him make friendships, let him explore, give him space, and love him through it.
Yeah, and then also just like learn your stuff, right? Like,
right.
You want them to get out of it, learn it.
Yeah.
Learn your stuff and learn good theology. There's some people out there, I mean, God bless the RFP fam, but some people in that group have new theology that's only been in the last 50 years of beliefs in Christianity. It's not orthodox. It's not consistent with Scripture. And you're redefining terms just like the IFB did. So if you want to convert the person in your family, you want the scales to finally fall from their eyes.
Yeah.
Learn it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, that's why you dug in.
Oh, definitely.
I remember I looked up this and it said this and then this and then this and then I looked up that and that. You would go on a whole, like if somebody quoted from Isaiah 61, you would just go on a tangent later on from what Isaiah 61 really meant. It's just dig in.
I looked up the words from the KJV. What are emulations? What does exhortation mean? What are some of those other terms?
Concupiscence.
Yeah, presumptuous. I had to look up all those terms because I was getting ready to confront our church for the pastor because of a disagreement and the not following Matthew 18, etc.
Well, that was the whole sexual
It's
abuse
a
situation.
big dramatic thing that I don't want to take too much time on. But I was doing research for that, and that's what really opened my eyes and helped me see. And Drew supported my study.
Mm-hmm.
He let me study, and he'd take care of the kids, and he was awesome. And I was able to share it with him. But you got to give them space, but don't be afraid to challenge and ask.
Yep, and just know time and place, time and place, time and place. And some people, if you're married to a narcissist, guys, then just do number one thing that narcissists hate. Starve them of the attention and their grandeur. That's all I can say there. But otherwise, if you're married to a decent human being...
And get help. Just get help. Don't try and face a narc alone.
Yeah, exactly. So you kind of left the IFB there, and then you guys ended up going, you know what, maybe we're not supposed to be missionaries to the deaf in England, and now you guys are not. Instead, you guys have chosen to be people who assist in your church, and Drew works a job outside of it. But so here, I want to touch on this before we closed and wrapped up, because I think this is important stuff. Because not every day I get my sister on the show, and it's not every day I get to talk to a woman on the show. And it's not because I don't like talking to women on the show. It's that all the women I know don't want to be on the show. Callie, I've been trying to get her on here for the last forever, and she just is like, nope, no thank you.
Yeah, the mic's a bit intimidating.
Yeah,
and so is that big screen over there.
Yeah, the big screen. Our patrons bought that for us. That was awesome.
They are awesome.
Yeah, they are great people. I am a big fan. They're also helping us take care of those boys who are moving in Saturday.
Yeah.
Which will be fun. You'll miss them, though.
We're moving out and they're moving in.
Yep, my house is a revolving door. So one of the things
If
here,
it's still standing after a circus.
One of the big issues in the IFB and the reason why a lot of women leave the IFB before their husbands is the husbands are given all the power and honor and respect, right? Because they're men. I am not a social justice warrior at all in all the liberal senses of the word today. I cannot stand woke culture. Anyone who knows me knows I literally cannot stand woke culture because it's so dumb and it's such a dumb way to look at the world.
Yeah.
I'm speaking very flippantly here. No, I'm not going to substantiate my claim because that's not the point of this podcast today. Anyway, But
we know you could.
But there is real misogyny and there is real sexism in the IFB.
Oh, yeah.
And the IFB is not as big as people want to make it out to be. That's one of the biggest problems that all people who are raised in the IFB, because that's all they were around. They're like, no, sexism is real, and they all they jump into the crazy feminism, and because they see some of these terrible. And now here's the thing: not all IFB churches are that terrible, but a lot of them are. But because they're around it their whole life, they just assume that Christianity is like that, so therefore they must be the feminist Christians.
Yeah.
So you're a reasonable human being.
I try to be.
You have actually been through stuff, and you are still, it's funny because you're still complementarian in your views of men and women, but you just understand the fact that they completely, like you said before, they redefined terms and they perverted the original understandings of certain words. So some of the things that women go through in the IFB, you as a woman, what are some of the big things? I wanted you to talk about like the nursery situation, things like that. I think would be really interesting for people to hear.
Okay, so we could talk dresses and skirts for days, but I think that's been covered by almost every podcast. So some of the other things, for example, all the ironing so that we could be presentable on Sunday morning. We would parade through the church, the front entrance where my husband would kindly drop us off at. We'd go through the auditorium. We'd leave the auditorium and head straight to the nursery. And that's where I stayed. The only time I was given leave was when we had deaf people that needed an interpreter. So I was allowed out for interpreting, and then I'd go back. In the church they would say, we love kids and we are okay with kids. But if my kids made a peep, if they made any kind of noise, the pastor was glaring at me to leave. So eventually it got too hard, and I just left. I gave up on trying to be a part of church.
I remember you were talking like I haven't been in a normal service in over a year.
Yeah.
Because I'm only ever in the nursery because no one will volunteer for it. So I leave home, I pretty up my kids.
For me to babysit my own children.
For me to babysit my own children in the nursery when I may as well stay at home.
And there wasn't even another family in there that had kids consistently. Every once in a while we'd get somebody in there.
Right. And then otherwise, we need you for deaf interpreting, so we need your skills, so something you do for us.
And
All
then
right, now
suddenly
go back to your nursery.
Yeah. And then suddenly, somehow, somebody does know how to work nursery.
Yeah, and then suddenly, you also went through this whole phase where, like, for example, nursing a child. You know, you were, the way they act, because the IFB is weird about that sometimes.
Yeah.
Like, you can't just nurse your child in the middle of the service half the time with these places.
So I had a really huge, it was basically a skirt pattern cover. It was enormous. And did my very best to be modest. But they still wanted to shoo me away into a room to be all by myself. And again, just not be a part of the church. And by the time I ever left nursery or whatever, because nobody would notify me, that church was done. Everybody's gone. So we arrive, we parade, nursery to watch my own kids. And that was that.
Yeah, I mean, then there's that. Then there's
So that it wasn't church, it was a parade.
Right, which went back into the whole, like, we're obsessed with appearances.
Yeah.
You don't care about my family. You don't care about the heart. What's going on? You don't care about taking care of it. You don't care about taking care of us. You only care about being able to see that we are here in the building.
Yeah.
Oh, they did their due diligence.
Admire their cute faces and their ties, but yeah.
What are the other things? So you went through that. Also, you were told by a particular person who was a mentor to Drew at one point. I just wanted to mention this. This is interesting. We didn't talk about this before, but he basically told you, like, you need to put out for your husband more.
Oh, yeah.
Like, things like that where it's like they just, like, shove their nose into your sex life. Like, they somehow know what's going on in you and your husband. This is crazy.
Well, unfortunately, there were some very personal questions asked, and if they found out we weren't active the night before, then it was my fault.
Which is just absurd that they are even asking that. Like, that's nobody's business.
It is nobody's business, and, that was actually incorrect. Yeah, because we were on a trip and everybody's tired. I mean, that's just a thing. Or if Drew had a bad day, then I was to comfort him that way. What they don't know about my husband is he actually doesn't respond well to that. He needs space when he's having a bad day.
Right. He needs time to think and calm down and process.
Yeah, he's a person. And that's okay.
Yeah. Well, again, they treat us so.
He's not some kind of sex machine. He's a person.
Yeah. Well, that's what drove me nuts. It's like they treated us men like we were just sexual machines and sexual animals, and then they treated women like you were just.
I existed for that.
Yeah, like you were the hump pillow, for lack of a better term,
Yeah.
or more of a crude term. It was awful. Like, guys, I just remember that all the time. Well, man, boys can't say no, and these girls need to, and the girls never want to, but that is toxic to a marriage.
It is.
Nor is it biblical. So those are things like that you women go through. And there's also, you were told to shut up. I think you're not allowed to talk in certain scenarios, right?
So when we were on deputation, my opinion was often asked, and of course, that's basically if you disagree with what I hope you say, we don't want to support you. And they were really light questions most of the time, but I preferred theology, so when I heard the men talking, I tried to butt in on their conversation. And instead of being allowed to quote a Bible verse, I just get glares like, what are you doing over here talking to us? You should be over there with the women, is the kind of faces I'd get. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to talk about how to make biscuits. I don't really care about how to make biscuits. It's not my cup of tea.
I am an intellectual.
I'll cook because I have to, but it has never been a great joy to me. I envy to those who do enjoy it, but
You've always been that way. You've always been the literature person. You like writing, you like reading, you like learning. That's always been you.
Yeah. I love science. I love history. I love. Yeah.
So you have that
psychology,
and that was unfortunately in the IFB they don't value that much in women.
No.
In fact, they oftentimes didn't like it when a woman was smarter than them.
No.
Which half the people, they seem to thrive and think it was okay to be ignorant. So I think that's I don't know. That's just some things. I just think people need to understand the fact that, like, look, it's not always easy. You know, you and I are both went different directions at first. We came back to reasonableness. I turned away from my sinful worldly ways. You turned away from your sinful, prideful ways of the IFB, and we both came back to normalness.
I hope so.
Yeah, well, as normal as we're going to be able to get. But, you know, when you're dealing with this stuff, it's like, you know, you were dealing with being unequally yoked for a while because you guys disagreed. You guys, you had to deal with, you know, sexism and how a woman is treated poorly in a church and seeing how unvalued that is, or how devalued children are.
Yeah.
You know, church.
Oh my goodness. So my kids would need a nap, but no, we're going out to lunch during that time. Your kids can nap before. And I'm like, they can't sleep if they're not sleepy. Or keeping them up until 10 or 11 for a conference every night. Like, that's normal.
Like, yeah.
And then accusing us of being lazy maybe when we're not up and making them go at 7 in the morning.
Yeah, well, it's a lot to ask a 5-year-old.
It causes serious, I mean, it could even cause brain damage because they're not getting enough sleep.
Yeah, and that's just so there's just so many things there. So for those who are listening, so let me ask you, Melinda, what would be, so now you're actually a pretty forward person now. You've a lot of that passivity that you had in the past because you were just trying to be a good submissive wife all the time.
I was trying to be submissive, and I just honestly didn't have any confidence in myself.
Right.
I didn't think.
Well, a lot of that has kind of recently been ejected.
Yeah.
So now, what would you say to people who say that you're still being divisive? Just because, because if you're arguing with somebody or telling somebody the truth, you and I are both known to kind of drop hammers once from time to time. So.
Oh, there's a few things I could say. Iron sharpens iron. So man sharpens the countenance of his friend. That's not gentle. That's harsh. I think of a hammer hitting a sword. Iron sharpens iron. So honestly, if I'm coming at you, it's because I care about you. The word exhort has everything to do with arguing. And we're commanded as a church to exhort one another. So it's actually not about being divisive. It's about provoking unto love. And it's about loving God enough to honor his truth rather than compromising it for the sake of preferences, feelings, man-made standards, fear of man.
You're preaching everything I love right now. No, it's so true, right? Like,
or money. I mean, that money, fame, those are enticements I see.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And and I absolutely agree. And that's the thing. It's like, I'm not coming at you because I hate you. Even in our rebuttal videos where Brian and I can speak very bluntly.
Yeah.
But the thing is, it's not ever in an attempt to just hate you, despise you, beat you, kick you while you're down. Is no, I love you and I want you to get out of this. And I love God's truth enough to follow through with, what is it, 1 Timothy 4, I don't forget, but basically rebuke the false teachers and the false doctrines. And it's like, we need to do that. And the church needs to become better at doing that. And, IFB talks about never compromising, not being a compromiser. And they're right in the fact that we shouldn't be a compromiser. They're wrong in the fact that what they think is what is worth compromising and what is not.
Yeah, we don't compromise truth.
Yeah, we don't compromise God's truth.
No.
But my preferences, I'm willing to compromise those all day because that's just my preference.
Yeah.
I'm amazed at why people don't go to certain churches. Well, I don't like that they do this. I'm like, really? That's not even a biblical reason not to go. Like, are you kidding me? That's a stupid reason not to go to that church. I don't like their lights there. I don't like the fact that they do this. I don't like their curtains. It's like, that's just stupid.
Yeah.
And no wonder why people have a hard. I think it hurts the testimony of the church. I think it's hard to take the church seriously.
Yeah.
When you're that petty.
Oh, definitely.
So.
I often wonder, when we have several Baptists or like-minded churches in an area, and we all, for some reason, think we need to divide our resources and be a block down from each other. If we would band our resources and our time and our love together, how much stronger would we be?
Oh, we'd be able to actually help the poor and the widow instead of just paying so much money to keep our lights on.
Right.
And that's one of the reasons, like I said, that's why I started this. I invested into this with my own money because I was like, I'm going to create a ministry where I can at least talk to people and minister to them outside of this, but they don't have to tithe, they don't have to give money. People who want to give to Patreon, they can give to that, but then we're going to take that money and we're going to keep putting it back into this, because for me, it wasn't about I didn't want to start my own church. I wanted to be part of a church, and I wanted to be part of a church that had its own resources and was working together with other churches. That was a big deal for me because I want that network. So what's going on upstairs right now?
It's late, and they've had Kool-Aid, so...
Okay. I was like, I've literally never heard that
hopefully
noise.
Callie and Drew can
Haven't
handle
lost
it.
their entire minds. So anyway, well, with that being said, we should probably wrap this up. So I'm going to ask you one question that I ask all my guests. So how do you think that your experiences and your ministry, because you do minister to people by teaching and talking and encouraging them, how do you think that you can help unite the divided body with everything we talked about?
Very basically sticking with the truth, living out the truth. I especially like to look at Ephesians when it talks about the armor of God. We were taught growing up, the armor of God is held together by the belt of truth. Or you gird yourself with truth. Everything else will fall apart if you don't have it.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to stick with the truth if you want to be able to stand against the wiles of the devil.
Fair enough. So equip yourself with truth, and then what unites divided people more than truth does, right?
That's what holds it all together.
Yeah. So if you're all committed to the truth, you should be able to be united. But if you're committed to a lie, then I have to expose the lie. And over time, it's funny because I'll try to be respectful of people after a while. Like, well, the problem with this idea, or let me tell you this. And when you can tell the person just doesn't want to, they just want to believe the lie, and they're not being reasonable. That's when it's time to pull the Jesus card and drop the hammer. And all right, you're just you're an empty tomb. You're a whitewashed tomb. That's what it is. So
yeah, and there is biblical instruction for that too.
Exactly. So, or to quote Paul, "Have I now become your enemy by telling you the truth?" So anyway, Melinda, thank you so much for being on the Church Split. For those who are listening,
thanks for braving having me on. This introvert.
Yes, it's always funny because I actually just interviewed another introvert the other day, and it's really funny. You can totally tell the differences between the guests, because when I have another extrovert, it's just, oh my goodness, and we're just like fighting over talking over each other because we're so excited about talking. And then I get the introverts on, and it's like, well, X, Y, Z. And I'm like, okay, further. So it's just funny because it's just horse. So I'm glad we're able to keep the sibling garbage to a minimum. We actually didn't horse around too much.
Yeah.
So that was impressive. So guys, if you haven't already, like and subscribe to the Church Split, and go join the RFP community, and you could get to see Melinda just going in there and tearing it up. Because that's the thing, is you're the studious one, so you're not the one who's going to put someone on full blast in front of them, but you're going to be the one who goes, all right, hold that thought. All right, here's my thesis.
Here's my thesis.
So anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Hoping that you've enjoyed this conversation between brother and sister. And just know the fact that, man, if you've been through some stuff with some people, stick with them. It's worth it. If you guys are both growing, stick with them. Even if you guys are on different islands, that's okay.
Yeah.
Because your islands can get closer together. Now we moved on the same island. It's pretty great.
It is.
You'd never know. And it's not because Will Hess is so great. It's really because I was terrible. I went into the world, I was terrible. I was an awful human being. And then, you went this way. And then,
Oh, I was casting judgment on all of y'all for going to the gas station.
You're
on
Baptist.
Sunday.
You're a professional judger.
Oh,
so
that was bad.
So I went over here, you went over there, and then over time we both grew to the Lord, and
yeah,
now here we are. So don't give up on the people that you're around. That's another moral of that story.
Yeah,
So,
love hopes all things.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a good one. We'll leave it on that. 1 Corinthians 13. Good call. Right? Yes.
Yes, very well done, Drew. Well,
I was like, that was the right
it's
reference.
late.
I am terrible at references, though. I can pull the Greek and Hebrew words, and I can get into historical. I can go to the historical context, and so it's like, well, what verse? I'm like, Google, what was that? So anyway, guys, again, thank you all. Take care. God bless, and see you next time on the Church Split.
bye. Thank you.